What if I told you one man killed so many people he accidentally saved the planet? This is the shocking true story of Genghis Khan, history's most unlikely environmental hero. In the year 1206, on the windswept steppes of Mongolia, a warrior united scattered nomadic tribes. Genghis Khan wasn't just building an empire. He was about to change Earth's atmosphere forever. Between 1206 and 1227, the Mongol Empire exploded across Asia like a wildfire, consuming everything, from China to Persia, from Russia to India. Genghis Khan's armies conquered over 12 million square miles, but conquest came with an unimaginable price. An estimated 40 million people died during his campaigns. Entire civilizations were erased. Thriving cities became ghost towns. Agricultural hotlands turned into wilderness overnight. Here's where the paradox begins. When people die, farms are abandoned, and nature reclaims the land. Scientists at the Carnegie Institution studied carbon samples from Antarctic ice cores dating back 800 years. They discovered something shocking. A massive drop in atmospheric carbon dioxide during the 13th century Mongol invasions. The numbers were staggering. Nearly 700 million tons of carbon dioxide disappeared from Earth's atmosphere. To put that in perspective, that's roughly equivalent to the total global carbon emissions from gasoline today. How did mass death create an environmental miracle? The answer lies in abandoned farmland and reforestation. When 40 million people died, approximately 700 million acres of cultivated land returned to wild forest. Let's go back to the beginning. In Iloar, a boy named Temujin was born clutching a blood clot. Mongol shamans declared it an omen. This child would spill rivers of blood and unite all tribes. His father was poisoned when Temujin was only 9 years old, leaving his family abandoned and starving. He survived by eating roots, fish, and marmots. He even killed his own half-brother over food. By 1206, Temujin had united the Mongol tribes through ruthless strategy and earned the title Genghis Khan. The title meant universal ruler, and they intended to live up to every syllable of it. His military innovation was terrifying. The Mongol composite bow could pierce armor from 300 yards away. Mongol cavalry moved faster than any army in history, covering up to 100 miles per day. They used psychological warfare brilliantly. Surrender and live. Resist and be annihilated without mercy. In 1211, Genghis Khan invaded the Jin dynasty of northern China with a force of 100,000 horsemen. Cities fell like dominoes. Entire populations were systematically slaughtered to discourage future resistance from other kingdoms. By 1215, Beijing was captured. Its population dropped from over 1 million to just a few thousand. But China was just the beginning. In 1219, Genghis Khan turned his attention westward toward the Khwarezmian Empire. The Shah foolishly executed Mongol ambassadors, giving Genghis Khan justification for total war without any moral restraint. The cities of Bukhara, Samarkand, and Nishapur were systematically destroyed. Millions died in the Persian genocide campaign. At Nishapur alone, every living creature was killed. Even cats and dogs were executed in brutal retaliation. Historians estimate skulls were stacked in pyramids outside city walls as warnings to other kingdoms nearby. By 1223, Mongol scouts had reached as far west as modern-day Ukraine and southern Russia. European knights had never faced an enemy like this. Faster, more disciplined, and utterly ruthless. In 1227, while besieging the western Shia kingdom, Genghis Khan fell from his horse and died mysteriously. He was 65 years old. His body was returned to Mongolia and buried in an unmarked secret grave. According to legend, anyone who witnessed the funeral procession was immediately killed to preserve the location's absolute secrecy. To this day, Genghis Khan's tomb has never been found, despite centuries of searching by archaeologists. But his environmental legacy was only beginning. His sons and grandsons continued the conquests for another 50 years. By 1279, the Mongol Empire stretched from Korea to Hungary, covering nearly a quarter of Earth's land. It was the largest contiguous land empire in human history, and it would never be surpassed. Now, here's where the climate science becomes absolutely fascinating and reveals the unintended environmental consequences of conquest. When the Carnegie Institution's Julia Pongratz analyzed historical carbon data, she discovered an anomaly in the data. Between 1200 and 1380, atmospheric CO2 levels dropped by approximately 700 million tons. Unexpectedly, this wasn't gradual climate change. It was a sudden, dramatic decline, synchronized perfectly with Mongol conquests worldwide. The mechanism was simple but profound. When agricultural societies collapsed, farms returned to wilderness and forests naturally. Forests are carbon sinks. Trees absorb CO2 through photosynthesis and store it in wood and soil. When millions of acres of farmland became forest, those trees sucked carbon dioxide directly from the atmosphere. Conquerors calculated that approximately 700 million acres were reforested during the Mongol conquests and aftermath. That's roughly equivalent to the entire Amazon rainforest suddenly appearing and absorbing carbon at maximum capacity. The cooling effect was measurable. Global temperatures dropped by approximately 1 degree Celsius during this period. 1 degree might not sound like much, but it's significant enough to affect weather patterns worldwide. This period coincided with the beginning of the Little Ice Age, which lasted until the 19th century. Rivers froze in places that never freeze today. Harvests failed. Famines spread across Europe for centuries. While correlation isn't causation, the timing is remarkable. Mass death created forests, which cooled the planet significantly. Genghis Khan's conquests removed more carbon from the atmosphere than any single human event. Until industrialization, ironically, the most destructive conqueror in history became the most effective climate activist, accidentally and unintentionally. But let's be clear, this wasn't environmental stewardship. It was genocide causing accidental carbon sequestration. The Mongol Empire did have some intentional policies that reduced environmental impact compared to other civilizations. Mongol culture was nomadic, meaning they didn't build massive cities or permanent agricultural infrastructure like other empires. They relied on horses and mobility rather than deforestation for construction materials and urban development projects. Mongol law protected hunting grounds and prohibited excessive hunting during breeding seasons. To maintain sustainability, Genghis Khan's legal code, the Yasa, included environmental protections that were progressive for the era. Polluting water sources was punishable by death under Mongol law, ensuring clean water for armies and populations. The Silk Road flourished under Mongol protection, creating unprecedented trade and cultural exchange across continents. Ideas, technologies, and goods flowed freely from east to west, accelerating human progress despite the violence. But the environmental benefit was accidental, not intentional policy. Death and depopulation created the carbon sink. Modern climate scientists have studied this phenomenon extensively, looking for lessons applicable to today's climate crisis. Could reforestation on a massive scale help reverse modern carbon emissions and combat current climate change? Some researchers argue we need rewilding projects, letting abandoned farmland return to natural forest ecosystems permanently. Others point out that feeding 8 billion people requires intensive agriculture, making Mongol-scale reforestation impossible. The ethical question remains, can we achieve carbon sequestration without mass death and societal collapse? Genghis Khan's legacy is deeply contradictory. Monster and accidental environmentalist, destroyer and inadvertent preserver of Earth. He killed 11% of the global population at that time, yet reduced carbon emissions more effectively. His empire connected East and West, spreading knowledge, but at the cost of millions of lives. Today's Mongolians revere Genghis Khan as a national hero, the founder of their identity and nation. His face appears on their currency, monuments, and buildings throughout Ulaanbaatar, celebrating his unification of tribes. But for descendants of conquered peoples in Persia, China, and Russia, he remains a symbol of terror. History remembers him as both the greatest military genius and the most prolific killer ever. Yet environmental science adds an unexpected chapter. He cooled the planet by approximately 1 degree Celsius. The forests that grew over his victims' graves absorbed more carbon than all pre-industrial societies combined. Those trees still stand in parts of Central Asia, silent witnesses to history's darkest environmental paradox. Modern satellite imagery shows these reforested regions still contain significantly more forest cover than before Mongol arrival. The carbon stored in those trees and soil continues to affect global climate patterns today. Some scientists call it the Mongol effect. Unintentional geoengineering through depopulation and subsequent reforestation cycles. It's become a case study in how human population directly impacts atmospheric carbon levels, but it also raises troubling questions about the intersection of violence, death, and environmental restoration. Can we learn from this historical accident without repeating its horrific human costs and suffering? Modern reforestation projects aim to replicate the carbon benefits without the genocide and mass violence. Organizations like the Trillion Tree Campaign hope to sequester carbon through voluntary reforestation on massive scales. Technology offers new solutions: carbon capture, renewable energy, sustainable agriculture without requiring deep. We can choose to restore forests without war, to heal the planet without mass death. But Genghis Khan's story reminds us how profoundly human civilization affects Earth's climate systems. Every choice we make about land use, population, and consumption has atmospheric consequences for future generations. The medieval warm period was ending as Genghis Khan rose to power in the 13th century. His conquests accelerated cooling, pushing Earth into the Little Ice Age decades earlier than natural cycles. The Little Ice Age brought crop failures, famines, and social instability to Europe for centuries afterward. Some historians argue this climate shift contributed to the Black Death pandemic by stressing populations. Cooler temperatures meant shorter growing seasons, weaker immune systems, and increased vulnerability to disease outbreaks. Thus, Genghis Khan's environmental impact echoed through history, affecting generations who never knew his name. His genetic legacy is equally staggering. Approximately 16 million people alive today carry his wick. That's roughly 1 in every 200 men globally, making him the most successful biological ancestor ever. His empire's genetic, cultural, and environmental impacts are still measurable 8 centuries after his death. Few individuals in history have shaped Earth itself as profoundly as this Mongolian warrior, and yet most of his environmental impact was completely unintentional, a side effect of conquest. This raises a fundamental question. Should we credit him for environmental benefits he never intended? The answer matters for how we understand historical responsibility and environmental justice in modern contexts. Genghis Khan never knew about carbon dioxide, photosynthesis, or climate change as scientific concepts. He couldn't have predicted that his wars would cool the planet for centuries afterward, yet the physics don't care about intention. Carbon was sequestered, and the planet cooled measurably. This paradox challenges our understanding of morality, agency, and environmental impact throughout human history. Can evil actions have positive consequences? Can positive environmental outcomes redeem genocidal violence? Most ethicists argue no, the ends don't justify the means, especially when millions died, but the environmental data remains undeniable. Depopulation caused massive reforestation and significant global cooling effects. Perhaps the real lesson is about unintended consequences and how human actions ripple through Earth's systems. Everything we do affects the planet. Our wars, our farms, our cities, our very existence. Genghis Khan's story is extreme, but it illustrates a truth. Humans are geological forces now. We have entered the Anthropocene epoch, where human activity fundamentally alters planetary systems forever. Unlike Genghis Khan, we can choose our impact consciously. With knowledge and intentional environmental stewardship, we can reforest without depopulation, sequester carbon without genocide, heal Earth without mass violence. Technology and knowledge give us options Genghis Khan never had for environmental management and restoration, but we must act quickly. Our carbon emissions now dwarf the Mongol reforestation effect by magnitudes. Since industrialization began, humanity has released over 2 trillion tons of carbon dioxide into Earth's atmosphere. That's nearly 3,000 times more carbon than the Mongol conquests removed through accidental We're running a reverse Mongol effect. Instead of forests reclaiming farms, we're destroying forests for development. Every year, Earth loses approximately 10 million hectares of forests, releasing stored carbon back into atmosphere. We need a voluntary Mongol effect. Mass reforestation, rewilding, and carbon sequestration without the death. Some nations are pioneering this. China's Great Green Wall, Africa's reforestation initiatives, European rewilding projects. But we need Mongol-scale ambition. Billions of trees, Millions of acres coordinated global environmental action. So here's the shocking truth. History's greatest conqueror accidentally became history's greatest environmentalist through mass death. 40 million deaths created 700 million tons of carbon sequestration and measurably cooled the planet. His legacy challenges everything we think we know about civilization, progress, and our impact on Earth. We cannot and must not replicate his methods, but we must match his environmental impact. The planet needs 700 million tons of carbon removed again, but this time through conscious choice. If a medieval warlord could accidentally cool Earth, imagine what we could do intentionally with purpose. This is the paradox of Genghis Khan, monster and environmentalist, destroyer and inadvertent planetary savior. His story is history's darkest environmental lesson, and perhaps our greatest warning about unintended consequences. What will future archaeologists say about our carbon legacy when they examine ice cores from our time? Will they see wisdom or folly, intention or accident, healing or destruction that future generations inherit? If you found this shocking paradox fascinating, subscribe to Ancient Anomalies for more incredible true stories. Hit the like button if history's environmental ironies blow your mind as much as they blow mine. Share this with someone who thinks one person can't change the world, for better or worse. Check the description for sources, scholarly articles, and deeper dives into the Mongol effect science. Next time, we explore another shocking paradox from history you won't believe actually happened until you see it.